Hello, I'm Jin. Today I'm going to talk about RESTful API. What is it and what are the characteristics of it and what are the benefits of using it? But first, what is API? API, which stands for Application Programming Interface, is something like allows a piece of software to talk to another. It's kind of a set of routines, protocols, and tools that you could use. A good API provides all the building blocks. Then we, as a programmer, we are not programmers now, put all the blocks together to build an application. It makes it easier, a little easier. And in web development, an API often refers to the way in which we retrieve information through a web service, online services. The API documentation will give us a list of URLs and all the required parameters and queries, and how do we make the request from that API, and inform you what kind of response will be given for each query. So let's look at an example. Facebook. 10 years ago, if we want to use Facebook functionalities and access the resource, we had to go to Facebook web application or Facebook web and app, same as Twitter, Google, and some other applications. They only allow us to access their resource and use their services through their own product. So if we are building our own app like Great Shepherd and we want to sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook or put Facebook likes or tweet about our product in our own application, we can do that because there's no way for us to connect to their server. So with the API, it kind of opens up an interface that allows us to connect to their server and gain access of their functionalities. So all the applications nowadays all have those some of those built-in features. So let's look at another example. So if we Google Map API, so if we want to have a map in our own application, we don't have to code the map. All we have to do is follow the Google Map API, and then we don't have to know like how the Google Map API does the work. We just follow the instruction and use it, and then we will have a map in our application. And I don't have to explain how do we use that, because we all have used it in our trip planner. And so there are two primary benefits of using this API. So API provides a layer that hides complexity, so we don't have to know how it works. All we have to know is how to use it and to get it work. And standardization. For example, if Microsoft wants the active printer to return the status, it doesn't care about what kind of printer you have. The API and does everything for us. So we just talked about Google APIs, Twitter API, Facebook API. These are particularly RESTful API. So what is REST? So REST stands for Representational State Transfer, which has something to do with like client-server relationship and how the state is stored. So back in the days, when the user signs into a web application, the user information would then be stored on the server in a session. So the server has to reserve a piece of memory for every user who is signed in. So the more user it gets, the more memory gets taken up. So if you have enough users signing in at the same time, so you're gonna have some performance problem. So in advancing that, it's a concept of REST. So client makes a HTTP request to the server to get, put, post, and delete data. And the server sends back the response in JSON, XML, maybe some other format. And in this process, client remembers everything. And it provides this information to server. And then server gets something done for you. But in this process, server doesn't have to remember anything about client. So RESTful API also usually referred as RESTful Web Service, as the name suggests. This kind of API usually provides services through a address, like URLs on a World Wide Web. And RESTful API is based on the RESTful technology that we just talked about and works the same way as a website does. So the client connects to a server through a specific URIs. And along with the request, client must provide all the information in the URI or maybe in the request header or body. But client has to provide everything. And to get the response back through HTTP protocols. So let's look at Google Map Okay, this is a diagram. Client makes the request with the information and get the response back. So let's look at Google Map API again. And Google Maps API has many resources. One of the resources is geocode. And what it does is take an address, maybe take a city name or address, and turn it into a set of GPS coordinates. So in the browser, you could type in the URL as shown on the left. And this is a GET request, http://maps.googleapis.com. This is the server, the API server, and /maps/API/geocode. These are the resources. We also include /JSON to specify that we want a response back in JSON format. You can also do that /XML. And then the stuff up the question mark are the queries. So we tell them the address is New York and sensor equal false. So when you send this request to Google API, and then you're gonna get the response back as shown on the right in JSON array. So you look at the key under the information under the key location. This is the GPS location, the coordinates. So you could use this data in some other APIs or some other web application which needs a GPS location. For example, if we use Twitter media search API, you could pass this GPS coordinate to it to get all the pictures taken at that location. Or you could also pass this information to use this API in our trip planner. Like if you want to search the location, GPS coordinates for a place that we are planning to visit, and then mark it on the map. And not only that we can get data from APIs, we can also write data to it. For example, the Twitter API. And you can post tweets to our account. But some API like Twitter requires authentication. And it needs to know like who we are first in order to post a tweet under our account. So before using the Twitter API, we need to authenticate first. And some authentication are free and some are paid. So we can also use we can also update data through put requests and delete data through delete requests. It works the same way as HTTP protocols. We have all used that before. And so what are the benefits of RESTful APIs? RESTful APIs are lighter and more efficient and faster since the server doesn't have to remember everything. So the memory it will be much efficient in time and space. And also they are more scalable and flexible. RESTful API are focusing on accessing named resources through a single consistent interface. So there are no expensive tools or no extensive processing required. It kind of makes us easier developing a sophisticated website or web application. And that's all I have for RESTful API, and thank you all for listening.